of our present crisis in masculinity. And basically, there are three events I want to just touch on just for a moment. The first, if you look on your outline, is the Industrial Revolution that occurred at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, why is the Industrial Revolution important? Because at that moment, 100 years ago, the Industrial Revolution dramatically changed the family. Large numbers of dads for the first time began to leave home for work. They used to stay on the farm and work, but now they leave home and they go out into the dark in the early morning hours to a factory. And with that move, the side-by-side relationship that dads naturally had with their sons was broken for the first time. Up until that point, a young man would get up and kind of live his life next to a nurturing dad. He would see his dad in the best hours of his day. He would see his dad's heroism out on the farm, or his creativity, or his work ethic, or whatever else, because he was next to his dad. But with the Industrial Revolution, all that stopped. Now when he got up in the morning, many times his dad wasn't there. And when his dad came home, he came home exhausted at the end of the day, and all he had left was a few meager tidbits for the family. In fact, many times what came home at the end of the day was an exhausted, tired, grumpy dad who wanted to be left alone. And some of you grew up in a home just like that. Mom, not dad, was left to head up the family, and in many cases, she did it heroically. But a son's world became a world in which he was shaped by women. Mom was there all the time for him, but she was a woman. He went to school in an elementary school that was probably taught at least 1st through 6th grade by women. When he went to Sunday school on Sunday, his class was probably taught by a woman. His world was shaped by women. And as for his masculinity, it was what boys made up together because dads weren't there. And that boyish definition of masculinity is what they began to take out into their adult life. And it was anything but noble. But that's all that they knew. Sociologist Alan Carlson, who was president of the Rockford Institute, which is a think tank in Illinois, made this observation. He said, "Today we are at the end of the deconstruction of patriarchy, which has been going on since the turn of the 20th century. And that's because the industrial age impacted manhood." The second major event was World War II, which further added to the disconnect between fathers and sons. You know, World War II changed a generation of men. And probably no book expresses that better than one that I read this summer by Tom Brokaw called The Greatest Generation. And you know what? When you read this book, you begin to think of these men as the greatest generation. Because what they did is they exchanged their youth for war. And their supreme virtues that they carried with them their whole life was sacrifice and duty. And they brought those back from the war, and because of that, they made the United States the greatest nation on earth. But here's what I want you to know about where we are today. What worked for these men in war did not work well with the family. Most sons of World War II veterans felt that their dads worked too much, took their fathering too lightly, and disconnected from them, especially emotionally. Now, I think there was good reason for that, because I think if you're a man in a war, you have to disconnect from your emotions, and it's hard to reconnect. And they brought back that disconnect, and all they knew was to work hard, and they did. But they didn't connect oftentimes, especially with their sons. So the industrial age took dad away from the home. It created distant dads, but World War II took many dads out of their sons' lives emotionally and created disconnected dads. And then came a third sweeping event in the 1970s, what I'll call feminism. Now, feminism is a great social movement that has recast all of human society or American society in the last 40 years. And feminism originally sought equality for women with men, and that's a good thing because women are equal with men. But over time, feminism's quest for equality also became the pursuit of sameness. And that's not a good thing. And it's left us as men terribly confused because now we're not sure how to act anymore. We're not sure what our role is. In fact, there's even a question of whether men even have a role. And what's unique about a man? No one seems willing or courageous enough to want to answer that. And anybody that's brave enough to even broach the subject is punished by society for trying to break out of this sameness direction that our culture seems bent on pursuing. So it leaves men confused because in a world of sameness, no one seems to know for sure just what a man is. And that's devastating. And the reason it's devastating is because we're back to Margaret Mead's quote. The role of every society is to find appropriate roles for the men. But if they have no roles, then they're left adrift. And so here we are as men on the front end of the 21st century, after experiencing a century of distant dads and a half century of disconnected dads and a generation of social chaos with women, and you finally come to the place and you go, no wonder we're confused. We're not sure about anything really in our life. And what we need is some help. Now let me finish up just making what I think are some bold promises to you if you stick it out with me over the course of the whole year. And I really hope that you do. Because if you do this, I think I can deliver on these 5 promises. Let me mention them to you real quickly. First of all, you will have a clear definition of manhood. Remember at the beginning we said most men can't tell you succinctly with a compelling kind of passion what a man is? If you'll stick with me, I can promise you this. You will leave here with a definition of manhood that you're excited about. And not only excited about living your life for, and excited about telling your sons about. That's the kind of definition we want to craft together in our time together. Secondly, you will develop a new manhood language. You see, in our modern culture, we don't have that language. And because we don't have a language, our souls kind of stay starved for some substance about real manhood issues. And without that kind of substance, what we end up doing is we end up talking about our boat or the Razorbacks or the Volunteers or the Longhorns, or about our business. And we stay right here on the surface. But we never talk about anything of destiny. Soulish kind of stuff that feeds the masculine soul. We have to build new bridges to one another. And those new bridges are built on a manhood language. And so over the course of this year, you're going to hear terms like servant leader and feminized man and rejecting passivity and leading courageously. You're going to hear about conventional manhood and manhood ceremonies and manhood wounds and things like that. You're going to hear phrases like, the boy in you must die. You're going to hear other phrases like, the king in you is what decides. Or if you're not being admired by another man, you're being hurt every day. And when you hear those phrases with one another, when you hear that this guy needs to unpack, you'll know exactly what you're talking about. And the other man you're telling it to will know exactly what you're saying. And that creates bridges of depth into the masculine soul that helps us live up rather than down. That's what men's fraternity can do for you, and I think I can deliver on that. Thirdly, you will make some significant personal discoveries about yourself. There's a lot, as I've said, about manhood that lies right beneath the surface of men's lives. But you know what we have on us? We have a lid on. Just like streets have those manhole covers, we have our own manhole cover over our lives because it's scary down under there. And sometimes if you watch government workers who tend our streets, they have a special instrument to pull that manhole cover up because otherwise you can't pry it up. It's just too heavy. I think that's the way it feels for a lot of men's lives. It's just too heavy to get that off so I can look inside. I think what men's fraternity becomes is the tool to help you pull the lid open and look inside. And though it may seem fearful at first, what I want you to know, it's the keys that are down in there to unlock your life. And that's why we need to get down in there and find them. Because they can open up a whole new adventure for you. And I think over the course of this year, you will make some exciting discoveries, some significant ones about yourself. Fourth, you will make some new friends here who are pursuing a common goal. And you'll do that both in the large group and in the small group. But I want to particularly reinforce what Bill said about the small group. You need to be in a small group. And if you're in a small group, and if you have the courage to open up your life and take a look inside and be willing to reveal yourself to other men, there are going to be some new connections made with other men. Some of the greatest friendships in life over the last 13 years started in men's fraternity. Just guys talking to one another, getting to know one another, being encouraged by one another. So I want to really encourage you to go into the small groups and be a part of that. Most men tell us at the end of men's fraternity that that was the most meaningful thing that they did. They joined a small group and they began to connect with men at a deeper level. And then the last thing is that you will have your own personalized plan for achieving authentic manhood. Now, Bill said we're not going to take an offering and we're not going to hawk the church or anything else, but I am going to ask you to do one thing. I'm willing to work for you for 23 weeks, but I need you to do one thing for me. Over the course of the year, we're going to give you this. In fact, I'll explain this in 2 weeks to you. Your manhood plan. Because the thing that we're trying to do is establish a new manhood identity for every man in here. But to do that, you need to do that work for yourself. You need to have your own personal plan for manhood. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to give you the sheet, and then you're going to use this as a draft all year to take the things that you're hearing week to week in men's fraternity, and you're going to process it for your life. It's going to ask you to look back on your life and what shaped you as a man. It's going to ask you to take a good evaluation of what you're doing right now. It's going to ask you to think about where you want to end up in life. And then to put all of that down and keep refining it. And at the end of the year, we're actually going to ask you to type it up and share it with the men in your group. And I'm going to ask you to give me a copy because that's what's going to be required to graduate here. All right? Every man's got to turn in a plan to me. But this plan can be the most profitable thing in your life if you're willing to take a hard look at your life. Men need to know where they're going. And when they know where they're going, they become a very positive and powerful force, not only in their own lives, but in their family's life and in the community. And that's what we want to help you achieve, a plan for your life. Okay? So, 5 presuppositions I've given you here this morning that's going to shape my messages. And then 5 promises that I think I can deliver on if you're willing to stick with me throughout the whole year. Men, welcome to men's fraternity and welcome to the quest for authentic manhood.